Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
How you all doing?
Well, thank you.
Good. Welcome to our March 7th breakfast for the League of Women Voters of Larchmont and Mamaroneck. I'm Beth Radow, the president of the League, and today we're very pleased to have Mayor Ann McAndrews and Village Trustee Marlene Kohlberg and Village Trustee Peter Finelli. We're going to have a village election on Tuesday, March 18th, and the polls are open from 7 a.m. until 9 p.m., and we hope we get a robust turnout for the election. The elections are uncontested this year, but we're going to hear statements from our elected officials this morning, and then we're going to open it up to questions because there are things going on in the village that we want to have an opportunity to talk about, and we've got a few years ahead of us so that we can talk about things that we might have our input on. Then I'm going to just, before we start, give some announcements about what's coming up. We're going to be having our luncheon with a political pundit, Phil Reisman, at Orienta. We hope you will join us, please. It's on Friday, April 4th, from noon to 2 o'clock. And it's always fun. We're going to have a political trivia contest beforehand. I'm working on some fun questions, so I hope that you will join us. And on the 2nd of May, we are going to extend an invitation to the superintendent of schools and the school board, as we do every year, to talk about the budget and have an opportunity to meet people who are on the board. The next day, May 3rd, Trustee Colbert's daughter, Elizabeth Colbert, who is a very well-known author, is going to be at the Village Center, which is behind the Larchmont Public Library, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon to speak about her new book, The Sixth Extinction. You might have read about it on the front page of the book review of the New York Times. And it was reviewed by Al Gore, and she always has really very pressing and intelligent things to say, so please join. And then again, on May 18th, we're going to have our community yard sale. This is all part of our sustainability concept, so if you can go into your garages and closets and get out things that you don't need, and you can sell them, make some money. We're going to, if you would like to get a registration form, you can go onto our website, lwvlm.org, or you can give me your email address. Last year was our first year, and this year is going to be as fun and more fun than last year. So I'm going to turn this over now to Ann McAndrews, and then after our speakers have an opportunity to speak, we're going to open it up for questions. However you want to do it. There you go.
Yeah, let me decide. Good morning, all. Thank you for coming. In the past, I've described the village of Larchmont as a lovely old house on the Sound, much beloved, but needing constant maintenance. After 2 years of mayor, I can add that, using the expression of my mother, that house has great bones, fabulous structural integrity, but every so often, it really needs some renovation and some updating. I and the entire village board recognize the commitment and skill of its staff, who deserve to work in a forward-looking village, and so we've embarked on several projects and initiatives. Now, I have a list, which my colleagues are very familiar with, which is why I accepted this job in the first place, and I really would like to cross some things off that list. And yes, to stretch the analogy, the list does sound an awful lot like a renovation. Water tanks and pumps, pipes, water meters, windows, generators, drains, flood prevention, and computer systems, for starters. But as we all know, you don't start a renovation without some kind of management strategy and a means to get the job done. So our board is awaiting the report of our management consultant, which will provide a roadmap for handling the day-to-day operation of village functions and also a structure to facilitate its capital projects. Those were all the big things I just mentioned. In the meantime, we have a new code enforcement initiative underway to improve the look and feel of the business districts. Now, obviously, we've had our frustrations, especially the delay of the Palmer Streetscape project, which we hope to start up this spring. Now, it's going to happen, but like so many of those home renovation projects, it takes a lot longer than planned. Now, while all this has been happening about the administration of the village, I've really enjoyed being its representative as mayor and to the public, and all the encouragement I've received from the public and my board. And so I would like to say I want to continue for another 2 years, and it's been quite an eventful last 2 years. I would appreciate 2 dull and boring years, without all the tragedy, natural disasters, and frankly, without geese. But I know that won't happen, and I know I can count on the support of my board and of the residents of the village of Larchmont in order to help us make the village of Larchmont the very best village, the best village in the whole wide world.
It's quite a country we live in. A week ago I was in Hawaii, and 2 days ago I was at 285 feet below sea level in Death Valley, and here I am back among the ice and snow. And guess where I would rather be. But I'm delighted to be here with you this morning. When I moved to Larchmont, it was 1966, and there were some extraordinary women in the League of Women Voters, which was one of the first things I joined, primarily a woman named Dorothy Barno and Mary Ann Johnson, who were talking about things like clean air and clean water, and something that nobody ever had heard anything much about. And they really made me an environmentalist, and by 1973, shortly before I became president of the League of Women Voters of Larchmont, of all people, Richard Nixon had signed the Clean Air and Clean Water Act, and that really made me an environmentalist, and that's really what I have been focusing on a lot, although in the interim, as many of you know, I served on the school board and as head of the Center for Continuing Education, so for many years I really turned my attention to that forum. And then in the early 1990s, something came along where something called Xanadu wanted to build 55-story towers on David's Island, and a heliport and a 550-boat marina and a bridge connecting David's Island to Glen Island Park. And at that point, I became very involved, along with some of the people in this room, particularly Nancy, actually, who were fighting the same thing. And in the end, we were actually successful. I took $250,000 that I helped to raise, and then a lot of those same people fought IKEA on our borders. So those were the things that I was involved in. And then in the early 2000s, I decided that I would run for office in the village of Larchmont, and I really have spent a lot of that time on environmental issues. That really has been my focus. And during that time, we've done some of the following things. We've banned the use of gas-powered blowers during certain times of the year. We have an anti-idling law, which prohibits idling when the ambient temperature is 40 degrees. We've banned the use of pesticides on village-owned land. In 2013, following the lead of our Sound Shore communities, Rye and the village of Mamaroneck, we passed a law banning the use of certain types of plastic bags at the point of sale. We've sponsored many educational programs. We held the first environmental summit, to which we invited community leaders and had a great discussion. We sponsored an expo in 2010, followed in 2012 by the Green Screen Environmental Film Series, and speakers were presented in our tri-municipal area. And in addition, under the guidance of Carol Casaza Herman, the village board adopted a climate action plan, which we are trying very hard to reduce our footprint by 20% by 2015, with 2005 as the base year. I should mention at this point that one of the people who's been very involved in that, our esteemed member Bruce McFarland, passed away during this year. But I have been extremely fortunate in having the most extraordinary group of people working with me on that committee, people who really care about the environment, and they've been working very diligently on that issue. And otherwise, my other focus has been the Larchmont Library. I think our community Mamaroneck, town of Mamaroneck, unincorporated town, and the village of Larchmont work together to support the library. And we have been very fortunate in a community that truly values the library, and I guess I don't have to tell you, during Hurricane Sandy, it really became the focus of the community. We've had extraordinary library directors who've really brought it into the 21st century. There's a wonderful, dedicated group of volunteers who serve as the board of the library, and they're really terrific. And my liaison job really is to bring the library concerns to the rest of the community. On a broad scope, I really see the job of the trustees and the village trying to maintain the services we have without the taxes going even further through the roof. That is really what we call a delicate balance, and it's very, very difficult. Everybody wants their snow removed, and everybody wants the police and fire to respond in 2 minutes, garbage pickup, and doing that at a reasonable cost, I don't have to tell all of you living here, paying your taxes, is a very, very, very difficult assignment, and now the governor has made it more difficult with the 2% tax, to maintain the services at the price is going to be made more difficult. So we are in the middle of our budget cycle, and we'll let you know what's going to happen. Anyway, Larchmont is an extraordinary place to live, and generations of Larchmont trustees have provided the high service in this community, and I'm very honored to be part of that tradition. Thank you.
Good morning. Can we all say good morning to each other? Good morning, everyone. League of Women Voters, thank you very much for having us. My name is Peter Finelli. I am a returning trustee. And the thing that excites me the most about Larchmont is keeping Larchmont, Larchmont. I was born here, raised here, the whole shebang. And the thing that I remember most was that it was always a friendly village. It was a place that you wanted to come. It was a place where neighbors knew neighbors. It was a place that you wanted to live, work, and raise your family. Today, I still feel the same way. I'm hoping that all of you do. And the most important thing is that we all just stay involved. What makes this village great is that we have a large amount of volunteers. We are a volunteer board, and we love our job, and we work very hard at it. But it's important that everybody else, volunteers, steps in and gets more involved with what's going on. We need volunteers at the Village of Larchmont position. So keeping Larchmont, Larchmont. We love what we have, but the infrastructure is horrible. As the mayor stated, pipes are failing, water systems are going down. There's a lot of large issues. So that's the main goal that we're going to look on, that we started in the last 2 years, that we're going to continue to work on. We have a great team in place. Marlene, Ann, myself, John Comar, and Lorraine Walsh. We work well together, very diversified. We all love the village. We all spend a lot of time making sure the village is at its best. We want it to be the best. Some of the things I'm involved with the Coastal Zone Management Commission, which is, keeping an eye on the waterways and making sure that the flooding is under control, especially from the village of Mamaroneck, town of Mamaroneck, and the village of Larchmont. I'm very involved with the Rescue 1 project, which is a new light and air truck that the village is going to be buying, because the last one we have is about 30 years old and it's about to fall apart. And so we've got a nice new state-of-the-art one which will last us another 30 years. This is an exciting project to me as a volunteer fireman, and it makes the volunteers feel good that someone's looking out for them and they've got a new truck to drive around and to be safe. In addition to that, the volunteers have grown through the Explorer Post, which is a fantastic thing for any of you in high school or in college that want to get involved in serving the community. We've gone from 4 to about 20, and it's growing every day. And they're all excited to be there. I'm also involved with facilities and maintenance, which is the bones of the structure, which deals with sanitation, DPW, things that I guess nobody else wants to do. It's not a glamorous job, but I enjoy being in I'm a backstage guy, so I enjoy being in the field like that. And then that's it. I just want to thank everybody.
Recreation.
Recreation, of course. That's another big one, where we sponsor, parades and the 4th of July event and the Ragamuffin. And that's a great one because we've got a lot of kids really get a lot of satisfaction from the parades and all the events that are thrown. The village is just fantastic. Ann is doing a great job. There is way too much on our plate, but it's all coming together nicely. and it's really going to take shape. And the reason why I want to come back for another 2 years is because we've started, it's coming together, we see the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's going to happen. And through the hard work of the board and the mayor, things are happening in Larchmont that are really exciting. And we need your support. We need you to get out and vote on the 18th. And just, every once in a while when you see the mayor, she puts in 50-hour weeks, give her a pat on the back and tell her thank you very much. Because we do that all the time because she really does spend a lot of time here. But again, thank you very much to the board. And that's it. Thank you.
We're going to open this up to questions. You mentioned that you are looking for volunteers, and so before we open it up to the floor, I'd like you to share with us and people who might be watching at home what type of volunteer positions and how might people be in touch with you in order to volunteer.
We take everybody. There are many boards actually that you don't have to be you don't have to be a resident of the village of Larchmont to be part of. We have, of course, what we call the land boards. That's planning, zoning, and architectural review. You have to be a resident for that, for those boards. However, everything else, the rec committee, the volunteer firemen, all the way to beautification, you don't have to be a member of the, you don't have to actually live in the be a resident of the village of Larchmont. Now, not that we want to scoop anything from you, Nancy, or from you, Carolyn, but sometimes interests overlap jurisdictional borders. For example, our business districts, the two of them on Boston Post Road and on Palmer, also serve to be the business districts for the town. And so if you're interested in helping us out and improving the business districts, come on over. Now, how do you get in touch with us? Very simply, just email me at mayor@villageoflarchmont.org. Pick up the phone and call me, Ann and John McAndrews. I'm in the book. And just contact anybody, call Village Hall, leave a message. Believe me, any way that you can normally think of getting in touch with us, we will respond to gratefully. Thank you.
One question that came up is that your elections are in the spring, and other elections are in the fall. And when we're looking at just cost saving and efficiencies, et cetera, has there been discussion about moving elections to the fall, and what's been the thought process around that?
Yeah, every so often the question comes up of why are you doing this in the coldness of the winter, and wouldn't it be more efficient if you moved the election over to November? Every so often we do discuss that issue, obviously, because we're very interested in efficiencies, and I'll tell you a few things about how we're making the village elections more efficient in a second. The problem with having an election in November always is what we call the fall off. In other words, how in the middle of an election that could be about the president, congressional, the county level, the state, the town level, can we make our campaigns viable, and can we be heard? We also, you may be familiar with what I mean by fall off, and that people start to vote at one end of the ballot and then they just don't finish. And this is something that anyone who's been involved with elections is familiar with. So given that we haven't really thought seriously about moving the election to November recently, and given in the meantime that the county and state have changed many of the rules about who's running the elections, it may be something for us to think about and think about seriously. But in the meantime, let me tell you what's happening to our election in March. You can never anticipate until about Valentine's Day, mid-February, whether we're going to have a contested election or not for a mid-March election. So we do have to kind of figure out what the temperature is. We have moved from using the very large, old-fashioned, but really wonderful voting booths to a paper ballot in village elections. And again, cutting the cost, because you have to rent those booths from the county or state, if we can even do it anymore. We have got 4 election districts in the village of Larchmont. We found, on closely examining the statute, that if we make a decision in mid-November, it's either something like 120 days before the election day, we can reduce our district to 1 for purposes of a village election. What that means is that we don't have to have 8 people standing around, 2 for every one of those 4 election districts. We could have 1 district, 2 people, and maybe 1 or 2 more if they need help. But this would be another way of saving a couple of $1,000s for our elections. 1 district. I found out recently that it had only become 4 about 20 years ago. So this isn't something strange. So we may be able to really be much more efficient in our village elections if we use our heads. When I told my sister, who lives in Nova Scotia, whose husband is the mayor of Mahone Bay, Nova Scotia, that I was going to have an uncontested election, she said, well then, just do it by acclamation, the way we do. And I said, well, we have a constitution down here, Barbara, and the right to elect and even write in a candidate is kind of like we fought a war for this. But every so often you wonder, gee, could it be a little easier? Another thing I just reminded myself of, several years ago, when I was not in office, I headed a League of Women Voters study about changing the term of office from 2 years to 4 years. What this would mean is that we wouldn't have to have a village election every year. We'd have a village election every other year. Maybe you'd have a mayor for a 2-year term and a trustee for a 4-year term. The problem is, remember how we were just talking about volunteers? Getting somebody to sign on to this job for 4 years, for 2 years is tough enough. 4 years, with the way the economy is, people's jobs change, just how much you want to project your life ahead is very, very difficult. But it would be a swell solution. A swell solution. It would add stability, and I still think it's a pretty good idea. So that's long-winded. Does anyone else have any comment that they would like to add on that?
No, but just talk a little bit about that. The continuity of trustees and the mayor changing every 2 years is a bit of a problem, I think, with the paid staff. Yeah. Is that they become accustomed to, working with one person or the mayor or trustee, and they build a relationship and then it's gone. So this is something that definitely needs to be readdressed and looked into. Thank you.
I think the issue of historical memory is probably true across the board. I'm in my 4th year as the president of the league, and very soon I'm going to be stepping down. And it takes, the complexities of getting things done. We've got new folks here today, and we hope you'll join us. It's a wonderful organization, and we need people in the community, not only on the governmental level, but as citizens, to be working together with our elected officials to help the community run. I've got the privilege not only of working on the league, but I've been working with Nancy Seligson, the town supervisor, and other volunteers on a sustainability collaborative. And you were talking about overlap before. We had a charrette. We had 2 meetings with volunteers from the community recently where we discussed some issues. And so to the extent that it involves the village, there were a couple of things that came up. One was the love 'em and leave 'em, the composting and keeping the leaves on your property. And another issue that came up was the leaf blower law that was passed, but concern over the fact that it doesn't necessarily get enforced. One of the questions, or one of the suggestions, was requiring that these machines have silencers on them. Would you please address how you're dealing with those issues? Thank you.
With regard to the enforcement issue, we've really worked hard with our police chief. And I must say that when he comes to village board meetings, depending on the time of the year, he's really very good about speaking to the issue of that moment, whether it's leaf blowers, whether when the temperature gets warmer, it's the anti-idling law. So we really have gotten their cooperation. I think people would tell you that last year and the year before were considerably better than prior years in terms of people, not using the leaf blowers in the times they're not supposed to. There are several problems, though. One of them is really education in terms of the homeowner. I speak to my gardener, and I'm sure those of you around the table speak to the people that take care of your own homes. And they will tell you that some people get very upset if there's one blade of grass out of place on the walks or something. So it's very difficult until you have the population really well educated to tell their own landscape people that it is not necessary to make this look like it's a museum, to get the gardeners to go along with that. With regard to the manufacturers, I do think that that is a larger issue than Larchmont and Mamaroneck, but I fully agree that that's where the focus should be in terms of trying to make. I'm sure there are ways to make these make the equipment quieter. The Love 'em and Leave 'em, we have been working very hard. There's a big conference, I believe it's next Monday, or it was this past Monday? Monday, this past Monday?
It has been postponed, I understand.
Oh, really?
Oh, wait a minute, what's the one?
Because
Am I thinking of the right one?
no, there's a big meeting either this past Monday, which I couldn't go to, or next Monday, which one of the people on my environmental committee, who now is also Catherine Parker's new environmental aide, which is really wonderful for all of us, was going to attend, because that is, again, a question of having the equipment. The gardeners, obviously, it takes them longer to love them and leave them and mow over them and make them into the right sizes as opposed to just blowing them off the property. But it is something that all of the people who are concerned about the environment truly are concerned about. I have talked with my own landscape people a lot. It's just been impossible thus far. And I think, again, it's a question if everybody does it, if the communities are able to do it, I think it will be it's something that will happen. I believe, in talking to Rick Vettery, that there are places in which he does do it now, and places that he doesn't. It's good. It's a fertilizer. It's a cover for the winter. I mean, there's so many reasons that it's good. People who have asthma have terrible trouble when their leaves are blowing around. It's an environmental hazard in lots of different ways. So, and obviously, it's the work of people like you and us sitting around the table to help push us, and so many things would be easier if at the county level, things would be done on a county level. I would think about when we just now had our reevaluation. Many years ago, we had a plan to reevaluate at the county level, and our dear friend Governor Pataki vetoed that, so it didn't happen, and that's got to be, 12 years ago or 15 years, more than that? So that's one of those things. I've served at the beginning of this new century on the county global warming committee. That big fat tome, I think, is now sitting on a shelf somewhere, and not too much of it is being worked on and forced. So it's really up to those of us sitting around here to push our higher level of government, because it is easier for us if it's done on a general. It's hard for the village of Larchmont to do it.
Thank you, Marlene. Marlene, I'd like to piggyback on the previous question about enforcement of the leaf blower law. It drives me wild that the village is the biggest non-compliant. You have told me before that it would take too much time to for them to get the leaves off any other way, or the grass in the summer. I don't understand why it wouldn't take even less time to do the same thing as we do it on our with my organic gardener, and he cuts it at 3 inches, and then cuts it several different places, or several different times, and leaves the grass cuttings on fertilizing the lawn. Why can't the village do the same, and for the same amount of time?
I've discussed this with the DPW many times. As a matter of fact, you can see sometimes when we're in Village Hall having environmental meeting, they're out there blowing the leaves. It's a question of having, don't forget, many of the places where they cut, people are playing, sports, and there are all kinds of different needs for every different field. But again, you're absolutely right, and it's something that we talk about and talk about. They have done lots of different things now. For example, there's a much different mulching process in the village so that everything doesn't have to be, that doesn't need the same type of weeding and all the things that we used to do. So we are slowly working our way to trying to come into, again, the 21st century and to meet the needs of people. But we do have a limited number of men on the DPW. We have a lot of parks, we have a lot of green space, and keeping them in the shape that people need for walking, for sports, is a difficult problem, and we're working on it. It's the best I can tell you, Fran. Anybody else?
The state budget has come out, and maybe it's premature for you to address it, but I think that's probably something that's, if it is, then just let me know and I can go on to another question. But, we've got a gubernatorial race right now, and we've all had many discussions about taxes and how, we have our own constraints at the municipal level. Can you share any preliminary thoughts, at least with us, about what we need to be thinking about?
Monday, I was at a luncheon in the city about public financing of campaigns, and the push was that the state should adopt the system that is in place in New York City.
What is that?
The public financing of political campaigns. Okay, and people were telling me, and it was interesting for me because it was something I wasn't really too familiar with, the New York City system, that it is based upon the idea of small donations, many, many small donations, and therefore getting more and more people really involved in the whole political system without the problems of the Supreme Court decision called Citizens United, which is allowing businesses without restraint to contribute to campaigns, and we're all pretty savvy here and we know what that means. Besides sitting next to several former League of Women Voters presidents, the point is that this is something, in other words, state money was being put into, was proposed by the governor to be put into a fund to fund political campaigns in much the same way as New York City happens. And people were speaking very highly of the governor's budget. I, as a municipal official, feel quite strangled by the governor's budget, based upon not only the tax cap, which is now down to 1.66% increase over last year's levy, which is very, very difficult to stay under because of the increased cost being established by the state level on us, specifically the cost of the pensions. Now, it would take another 20-minute seminar to tell you about the interworkings and the increases and the percentage of increases and how much of an increase. And yes, the pension did go down slightly, this pension contribution. But let me just tell you something. If I hire a fireman for $1,000, we contribute almost 28% of that $1,000 in addition to that $1,000 into the pension plan, the state pension plan. When I was first a trustee, we were paying under $50,000 a year into the pension plan, which was unrealistic. But now we pay over $1 million a year out of village into the state pension plan. So that's the difference within 10 years that we're talking about on these costs. And then we're told, oh, by the way, if the village of Larchmont and the town of Mamaroneck and the city of New Rochelle and Pelham want to get together for paving contracts, which we are doing, and I believe the village of Mamaroneck too, for paving contracts for asphalt, we all hold our breath and say, dear God, we hope the price of asphalt, which is a petroleum product, hasn't gone up over 2% over the last year. Well, guess what? It's the tail wagging the dog. And now, not only are we dealing with with the cap, but with the idea, okay, we've frozen those taxes, now we're going to reduce them. Call your legislator. Call your legislator and have him vote for this part of the new budget, because then we'll give you a couple of $100 as a tax rebate on your state taxes next year. So I say, okay, you're going to get $200, $300 back. I have to fire a policeman. You know. Now, I'm speaking very realistically now, because I know that there are going to be requests for more staff coming in our next budget hearing on Monday night. And by the way, you're all invited. If you want to come and hear the police, fire, and DPW, come Monday night, Village Hall, 6:40. Come one, come all. We may have pizza. That's a new thing in our budget. I don't know. Where are we putting that? But my point is that we have this has put us under tremendous constraint, and at the same time something else is happening. Yes, we have been under the cap for the last few years. When we go out to borrow, we're able to borrow under what is called a BAN, B-A-N, borrowing in anticipation of a note. And those those interest rates are very low, around 1%. And we can do that for a number of years. The max is 5%. So we've been keeping our borrowing on that, that level for as long as we can, and then we go out and buy our bonds, which are around 3%. Well, okay. So we're at the end of our 5 years now, folks. So our interest rates on our borrowing for all that stuff that we've been talking about, those new trucks that the DPW needed so desperately, finding out that one of the fire department Jeeps is like 16 years old and is really cold because the heater doesn't work, things like that. Those costs now, everything that we borrow in a capital budget, everything that we have in the past that we've kept at 1%, rather, for as long as we can. Boom! Now we're faced with those increased numbers. We don't have those numbers yet. We don't have them yet.
For our local budget.
The treasurer is speaking to our department heads. They are to speak to us on Monday. Then we have on the 18th of March, we have what we call a preliminary budget. We'll have some ideas, and then we have to start looking at it very closely. And the final budget is to be adopted roughly the 20th of April. Okay? So as for my opinion of the governor's budget, to get back to that, he's not doing municipalities any good on this, and you can quote me on that. I don't think the governor's office is working with the municipalities on the taxes. You find that there are many, many things going on in the state budget that are beyond my knowledge right now, but every time I hear about it, it's the shifting more costs onto the localities and not allowing the state budget to be fairer. It's not a good situation to put the burden on the localities and giving us only a few tools to use to raise revenue.
I'd also like to say that, I think probably a lot of you around the table understand that one of the big problems in the budget for us is that in New York State, it's one of either only state or one of two, I think Nebraska maybe being the other one, where the Medicaid costs are passed on to the counties. And that is a huge problem in terms of the budget for the localities. And if any one thing were to be changed, I think that would be a major change. I would give a shout out to our state senator who is here to say that he at least had the courage originally to vote against the tax cap, for which he got a lot of flack. So he deserves the credit for that. Just to note that. He understands that his municipalities really suffer with the tax cap.
George,
you like to comment?
Can you comment at all on the status of that legislation? Can you? I think we need a microphone. Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Thanks very much. As we're speaking today, and for people who may be watching this at a different time than we're actually here today, it's Friday morning, March 7th, and the budget in the state of New York will be closed by the 31st, which I believe is a Monday. So there's about 3 weeks to go, a little over 3 weeks to go. So there's some volatility. There is still the negotiation that has to come between the Assembly and the Senate over the governor's proposals and changes that are at hand. The specific issue that the mayor talked about, the governor's proposed a tax credit, an income tax credit, if the local governments stay within the tax cap for those individuals who live within that jurisdiction in the first year. And then in the second year, they have to show, these municipal governments, according to the governor's plan, it's somewhat vague, have to show efforts, of course I've always been diplomatic, so I continue that tradition, that there has to be some defined effort toward consolidation. Now, I could certainly make the argument that Larchmont Village, Mamaroneck Town, and Mamaroneck Village have shown numerous opportunities for consolidation already. You have a consolidated sanitation district between two of the communities, EMS between two of the communities, coastal zone management, LMC-TV between all three communities, and I've been corrected. But the bottom line is it's 2 and 3 in many situations, which is not the case in other places. So obviously the governor and some others believe that outright consolidation will solve problems. I don't happen to believe that. I think that the delivery of local services in Larchmont, the delivery of local services in Mamaroneck Village and Mamaroneck Town, if they were combined, would do nothing to change the legacy costs, which are the obligations for pension, which is the single largest growing part of the mandate. If you want to cut property taxes, then the state picks up more of that pension burden because it's the state that manages the pension system. We set the rules. It is the state that does the investment and either produces or does not produce the result. And so I've argued that. I have legislation to do that. As far as where we are on it right now, I'm trying to predict in advance. I think there's going to be a modification to what the governor's proposed, but what that's going to look like and how much in the three-part negotiation there'll be a push and pull. Anybody who's ever been involved in a negotiation knows it's not going to look that way at the end as it is now in the proposal stage, but how much of the original plan is part of it or not. I think that the problem in terms of tying it to the tax cap, because it is, as you pointed out, not just a 2% levy cap, but it's 2% or consumer price index, whichever is less, which makes it a lower number, that you ultimately wind up in every one of these communities burning the furniture for firewood. And this applies to the school districts, in some ways even more so. To those who are watching live in the village of Mamaroneck, it applies to the library district in Mamaroneck Village and on and on. So, the reality of what you face in this village and in the other communities is that we have put in place restrictions and constrictures that make it difficult for you to operate. And until and unless the overall legislature and the governor decides to restructure that, you have to live under those rules. I've disagreed with those rules, but the bottom line is the budget, when it's passed, will have some version of tax reduction, but it's not going to be what I would see, which is the broad-based reduce the state mandates. Reduce the state mandates, let the village, the town, the library district drop that savings to the bottom line, and residents will see a moderation in taxes. But if your mission is to try to force consolidation, then this would be a direction. This is how you do it.
So Medicaid, yeah. Your Medicaid legislation?
Well, this budget doesn't include the Medicaid legislation, which would be a phase out of that mandate. The mandate that was alluded to by Marlene is probably a $7 billion cost to the state. And as much as I know it's a bad mandate, you couldn't possibly in 1 year absorb that hit to the state budget. There's no revenue that could offset it. So it'd be a phase-in. There are bills that go anywhere from 5 years to 20 years. I think for it to be a practical reduction of your property taxes, it would have to be a 5-year phase-in. And basically what it would mean is this. If you had a full elimination of that mandate, which would be picked up by the state, and might affect how much you pay based on your income taxes. Mm-hmm. But your property taxes, which are not based on your income, if you pay $20,000 a year in property taxes, you're paying about $5,000 a year to the county. The county spends roughly 40% of the total tax levy they collect on that one mandate. So if you phase that out, in theory, over 5 years, you reduce 1/5 of that 40% each year, and so your $5,000 would ultimately go down by 40% to $2,000. You'd save $3,000 on a $20,000 tax bill, which is better than saving $20 on a $20,000 tax bill, which may be the other way it happens. But it does require agreement, and I have to add New York City, which is 40% of the state. People who live in New York City do not have a property tax burden as an individual taxpayer. Ask your friends who have a house in the Bronx or Staten Island, they'll tell you that property taxes are very reasonable because in New York City, the commercial property tax raises a lot more than the residential property tax does, and they have an income tax to fund local government. So I've talked enough. That's the update.
That's great. Thank you very much. Did you? Yeah, we're going to, 1 second, Margie.
I'd just like to say a word about the term consolidation. What we have here is sharing of services. The town and the two villages share services, and they also take care of unique services within their area. And the idea seems to be out there that if we do away with the villages, we'll save money. And I'll say, well, aren't you just, if you eliminate a police force and have the other, let's say the town police force, cover the village of Larchmont, aren't you diluting the coverage that's there for both the village and the town? You know, we would not, if we keep the same level of service that we have, consolidating these into one police force or one fire department doesn't necessarily save that much money. You still have to have fire engines at certain distances from your home. We still have to have things stationed across from each other, across from I-95 and the train tracks. We still have to have coverage of the different apartment buildings that require certain equipment. And we still have, at the same time, tremendous mutual aid between the town and the village at all times concerning these emergencies. So the thought of, okay, just do away with them and we'll save all that money that the village is costing us, is, I'm afraid, just a very unfortunate but inaccurate understanding of what municipal services are.
You know, if I can make a suggestion, because the consolidation issue comes up every year. If somebody could write an op-ed piece that could go in, it's going to come up, right? And it's an issue. If someone could write an op-ed piece that could go into either the Times, the Journal News, Phil Reisman's going to be our speaker. We know you'll all be at the lunch, and you could suggest it then. But no, kidding aside, I think that it's something that people need to understand because, as you've just mentioned, the pension is the issue. And so that issue isn't going to go away. It's the legacy issue. But I think that for whatever reason, or you just explained that you have to have fire equipment within a certain distance, regardless of whether or not you consolidate or not. And I'm not sure that people necessarily understand that. So I think it could be very helpful.
They think we're duplicating.
But you're not.
Well, they think we're duplicating services, and we are not.
Right. Okay. I want to get, Margie wanted to just ask a question, and then I'm going to come right back.
But just related to what you were just talking about, the Bill Denzer study, can that be referred to? A great deal of time and effort went into that to see that, to really study the whole problem of consolidation. He was very frustrated at the end, we all were, because of it so much depended on the pension situation. But it was done, maybe bringing it up to date and reminding everyone a real study was done with a lot of effort.
You know, LMC-TV now has this new live program, and maybe, you know, they're looking for formats, and I'm speaking to LMC-TV right now, so maybe we should have that as a show. Marlene? Margie, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Just a very quick question. The continued vacancies along the commercial strips of the Post Road in Palmer, there has to be a real negative effect on the tax base and so on. Is it being addressed? Is it all tied up with the landlords and their greed?
I don't know if I'm standing in front of the camera. I did not fall down. So. I did not fall down.
Very limber.
Yeah, wow, I couldn't get up that fast. Good for you. I was sort of anticipating some questions about the economic vitality of Larchmont Village. as well. And every so often I use the expression that the village is not the people's republic. You know, we are not in control of the of all the stores, the landlords, the retail areas. Our job is to make this the most attractive village that's possible, and we were talking about a renewed initiative for code enforcement that includes property maintenance, signs, awnings. We've sent letters out to the property owners and shortly to the merchants. Code enforcement will be increased. We'll be going door to door with the merchants to say, you know, this is something that you have to improve under our statutes. Please do it. We're not going to be passing out a whole bunch of violations unless we absolutely have to. That's not the purpose of this. We are going to be initiating the streetscape this year. Please God, that's one word. Streetscape, please God, and with that we'll have benches and trees, lovely sidewalk, curbing, improved lighting. That is just about what we can do. And then it is up to real estate agents to try to think of who they can bring in to rent those properties. And as what? Let's face it, this village has changed radically since we first moved in. Retail has changed. Maybe those stores can't support retail anymore. More and more are supporting dining, like in Mamaroneck Village. Dining, personal services. We laughed for years about, oh, so many nail salons. They're still there. The retail is gone. The nail salons, maybe they've moved, but they're still there, which means that they're speaking as raw capitalists here, they're fulfilling a demand. Well, jolly good. What else can we do to bring businesses into this along the streetscape? Years ago, I was told by someone in the know that we have too much retail space. Well, the market has proven that. The market has proven that. Some people say you should have fewer banks. Well, no, right now, because they are providing a service for the people. A few weeks ago, the Historical Society had this absolutely marvelous presentation called Larchmont Then and Now and Then. Picture of the area, a block of stores now, and then what it used to be. Well, it was interesting. These small produce stores. Then, 40 years later, they became the first Gristedes, the first A&P. We remember that. And now, what are they? Some of them are sort of boutique-y food stores. And now we're talking about Peapod, which is what those produce stores used to have when they delivered food. So there's more and more personal service involved. So the idea of the village can do something to fill those stores it's sort of a cosmic question. First of all, we're only 20% of the taxes those people are paying, so we're in no mood to give any rebates to anybody. Thank you very much. But it's going to take some inventive, creative thinking. And it's something like the old joke of, you know, there was one lawyer in a town, and he was starving to death until another lawyer moved in. And then they both prospered. Well, then, let's say we get some boutique stores in a row, or stores that decorators would come to, or stores that have some interest, or a set of restaurants like what's happening in Mamaroneck, that people will have an interest because there's a certain core, there's a certain encapsulation of interest there. Well, that's something that we really have to look into. The village will do everything in its power to have adequate street lighting. Street dining has been a stupendous improvement in our whole livelihood. Those little sandwich boards that are out on the streets, absolutely against the code. I love them. I think they're interesting. But what I'm saying is that we have to be creative, and we are doing our very best to work on making it an attractive community so that the businesses will come and prosper.
There's only one thing I want to add to that, and that is that I wonder if anyone has ever done a study of the tax code, because I wonder in terms of having stores empty, and if you're a landlord or whatever, if it's in your interests to keep that store empty because it doesn't hurt you in terms of your taxes. I've never done that study, and I'm not a tax lawyer. Okay, I think.
Okay.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Svetlana Wasserman. I'm a 10-year resident of Larchmont. Have been the best 10 years of my life, and I want to thank you for your service for contributing to that experience. I wanted to ask you today about a policy that is causing extreme pain, hardship, and upsetment to a large portion of your constituents, as well as in Mamaroneck. I'm sure you've heard about the Board of Education's plan to stop providing school bus service to children attending religious schools, special needs schools, and independent schools, and instead send them to school on unsupervised, on public transportation, on commutes that could be 3 hours or more a day, and include transfers between buses and trains, and in addition to 4 to 6 miles of walking. And I know that this policy is not in your jurisdiction and you don't have control over its adoption. However, you will have to pay the price of the policy in terms of the environment, more parents having to drive their children to school and congesting and polluting our roads, in terms of policing, because monitors are required by law to be stationed at transfer points. In terms of the reputation of our community, I have spoken to so many parents who have been born here and now feel betrayed and feel that they don't feel at home here. And I also worry about the reputation of our town, especially when every other district practically does provide transportation to their children, and how we will look as a district that chooses to provide fewer services to their families. So I just would like to know, what are your views on this policy?
Thank you.
You know, every so often I really have to step back from an issue, and this is one of them, although I certainly understand your concern. New York State, as you know, is unique in having this service. But what I've also seen is kind of things become backwards. And let me just, and with this comment, and realizing that I work a lot with the school board, and I understand they have quite an issue in front of them. And I think it's wonderful that we have the opportunity here, especially in this community, to make our views known before our school board, and the school board who are from us. We know many of our members of the school board and are very, very community minded. But just coming back on the old poli-sci major planning urban development idea, is that because New York State has had the system it's had, bus routes didn't have to aim towards where the schools were. Schools didn't have to be built near public transportation. and so the system kind of became, it reacted to the reality that transportation was given. And that's the way things have happened. I wish you luck, and I hope that the school board will make a decision that will be honest and fair to all its constituents.
Anne's comments about where they are is amazingly true. I do see a lot of kids on the train going, for example, to Fordham Prep. I do believe that at the elementary level, they absolutely should continue to bus kids, because it's just absurd to send kids. And there obviously are rules about how far they can go, blah, blah, blah. So I really think that at the elementary level, they need to continue that. I think that at the secondary level, we have to figure out exactly. Some schools are on the Metro North line and some are not. I think that has to be looked at very carefully. I believe Rye Neck was probably the first school district to start this whole process of not providing transportation for its children. The school district obviously is faced with the same problem we are. It's providing education or busing, because obviously the 90% is no longer 90%. Mamaroneck School District, in terms of the aid that it gets, it's at some ancient level that we get because we're considered a wealthy district. So every time they take a mandate away, they sort of subtract it from this old district money that we get, and it's just a ridiculous amount or little amount of money that Mamaroneck School District gets from the state. So there are so many levels on which things are terrible for the school district, and it's fighting the same 1.66%, 2%. It's got to get its budget passed. It's going to get penalized if the budget doesn't get passed. Then it goes back to some ridiculous number from the year before. I mean, it's just awful. So I do also wish you well, and I do think at the elementary level particularly, the kids ought to be, that ought to be a no-brainer. At the secondary level, I think they have to very carefully look at how long it takes a kid and how simple it is, to get from here to your private or parochial school. But think of the school district's problems. They are really awful. So.
You just mentioned something about the affordable housing that's
Sure.
where that is.
The rock pile. We have our own rock pile. As you know, there is two buildings about to be built on Palmer Avenue, along. Let's see, by the Guitar Center, I guess is the best way to describe it. It's going to be about 54, 55 apartments. They are all going to be affordable under the Westchester County housing settlement. What that means is that they're going to all be condos. There will be about 5 of them that are going to be a particular category that the village of Larchmont has an agreement with for workforce housing with the county. So separating those out, you'll have about 48 apartments that will be under the county system, the county settlement system. What that is that you have an income limitation of 80% of the adjusted income in Westchester County, which for a family of 4 is about $88,000, give or take. Okay, so if you do not make more than that much money, you then can go into a lottery. If your name is picked, then you can see if you qualify for a mortgage. You have a down payment, maybe 3-5%, and qualify for a mortgage with a consortium of banks. You will then be qualified to buy one of those units. Now, what happens if you make a little more money? Let's hope. You know, you still own the apartment. You can be there forever. We aren't throwing anybody out of those affordable houses. So this is an opportunity for people who cannot afford what's on the market without having more income.
Do you know what they're selling for?
Yes. Well, the figures I have in my head are from 2013, but roughly $169 for a 1-bedroom, which frankly is pretty close to market these days. So you can find one bedrooms. There'll be 1 and 2 bedrooms, and a very small number of 3 bedrooms.
Have they broken ground?
They have broken that. Go down and go buy that.
Go buy Jack's.
That those mountains, you used to see something kind of solid. That's all chopped up now, and that rock is going to be used on site. So we don't have to worry about X number of trucks coming to and from the site. That rock is going to be used on site, which is kind of neat. You asked a question about remediation. Yes, there had been a problem about some seepage. That is being undertaken by the contractor. The health department and the state DEC are on that and have been. It's going to be an interesting building, two buildings, because it was initiated as a private project that got caught in the downdraft of the economy in 08, 09, and It had gone through an incredibly rigorous planning and zoning review by the village. And it has things like large retention tanks under it in order to slow down stormwater, stuff like that. So we are looking forward to having the building completed about 2015. We hope to be the opportunity of greeting more people into our community. It is going to be an increased rateable, although for tax purposes, but not at fair market value. And we look forward to having more neighbors.
The best affordable
The best affordable housing in Westchester County. Okay. Did you want to make a comment?
No, that's what I wanted to say. Oh,
Oops. That's great news. I want to thank Ann McAndrews, Marlene Colbert, Peter Finelli for coming. I want to thank you all for coming and everyone at home for listening. Please come to our luncheon at Orienta on April 4th. We have Phil Reisman. Thank you.